Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. And welcome to Eorzea Photography. I am Red, also known as Gethro. And today I am joined with my co-host Nyan.
Hello.
And Semi. Oh, maybe she's not hearing, but hello, Semi. And Saraya is there, but she's muted at the moment.
Hi.
Oh, there she is. Yes, welcome to Eorzea Photography. Today we are doing a stream where we're gonna do a very sort of basic like GSHADE preset from scratch. Right? If you look at the screen right now, there's a menu on the left, and that is GSHADE. And GSHADE is basically a special version of Reshade that is made with a lot of extra features, with compatibility in mind with any other sort of Reshade distros out there. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of shaders that are coming pre-packed with GSHADE. There's also a lot of presets that are available when you install GSHADE. And if you don't know what GSHADE is, it's sort of an overlay that applies onto a PC game, basically. And oh yeah, and this is gonna be specifically for PC players, right? If you have a PS4, this is probably not gonna be helpful to you, unless maybe you're considering switching to PC and you're wondering like if it's worth it. Maybe this will help you make a decision. So yeah, GSHADE is kind of an overlay that is applied on top of the game, and it applies some beautifiers to the game, basically, like all sorts of visual effects to make it shinier, prettier. You know, there's a whole collection of special effects that are there to either improve the game or give you certain tools to see maybe like the depth in the game or polygons or whatever. There's a lot of different effects in here, but we're gonna make what we call a preset from scratch with some of the, I would say, like most useful or most used techniques. I'm not gonna look at everything because there's a lot of techniques and a lot of shaders in there, but I've sort of cherry-picked the most used or most useful ones that are interesting to look at. So let's see, let's get in the game. Actually, that shouldn't take very long. And also, I almost forgot. Oh, of course, it's full. I almost forgot that we have the Eorzea Weekly winner to announce. And I'm gonna show a picture of the winner. There we go. Is everybody seeing it? It's a nice little picture. So this is the Eorzea Weekly winner for this week. It's a picture from Akira. It's a nice little Mikote girl, little baby girl. Very cute.
Akira.
She's the best cat girl.
She's
Precious.
He is so. I want to say that.
Oh.
So bad.
Thanks for the sub, the gift.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Let's move on. Whoop. Okay, back into the game. Here we are. Hey, thanks for the follow.
Ooh, thank you.
Alright, so we are here in Limsa at night. It's very dark. And I'm gonna hide maybe the UI. Like this. Okay, so before we start, is there any sort of like quick question about GSHADE or ReShade? If you're wondering, if you have any more question of what it is and what it does in general.
I had a question about it.
Yep.
Is it similar to Stormshade or is it the same program?
It's similar to Stormshade in the sense that Stormshade is a distributed release of ReShade, and GShade is also a redistributed release of ReShade. So they're essentially the sort of two different branch of the same program, with different kind of tweaks, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And ReShade being sort of the parent program that is used to make both. I don't remember if Stormshade was made specifically for Final Fantasy in mind, or like other games in general. I know that GShade initially was made specifically for Final Fantasy, but they've also added a lot of support for other games, even certain multiplayer games. So they have a sort of a whitelist system, so that if a certain multiplayer game is fine with having a certain effect like depth, rendering of depth, or things like that, these games can be whitelisted for the effects to be available while being online, like in an MMO or a multiplayer game, basically. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm gonna simply start by opening the main menu for GShade over here. And this is gonna be very similar, like ReShade is almost the same. By default, it might have a different color. And I'm hoping that the size of the text right now is okay on the stream. Let me know if you think that it's too blurry or if the text does not appear correctly. I could make it a little bigger. But I don't want to go too big because I'm gonna start losing some space, or much needed space in here. This should be good, I think. All right, so over here, now I'm just gonna try and go into the GShade presets folder over here. There's a lot of subdirectory. And what I'm gonna do actually is create a new preset. And we're gonna call it Potato. Just fine.
Solid name.
Yeah,
I love it.
Potato preset, right? And so what a preset is, basically, it's a file that is saved on your hard drive, somewhere on your hard drive. Like over here, it's gonna be saved. I think in the custom folder. Nope. Where did I save that? No. Oh well. Let's go in the custom. Over here. Already, Potato 2. Alright. I think that's where it's going to save it now. Alright, so a preset is basically a file that contains the information of which techniques are currently turned on. Right, so now I'm turning on some techniques, and what sort of values are being used for that technique, right? So if you got like 10 of these techniques turned on and they all have different values, These are every time that you save, not that you save, but that you make a change into those preset, into those values, it's gonna save into the preset file, right? And what you see in the list over here, these are what we call techniques, right? So I'm turning on different techniques and I'm turning off different techniques right now. And each of these techniques belong to a specific shader, okay? So the shaders are those .fx over here. This is the name of the shader file that GSHADE is using to produce the effect, right? So right now, if I look at, it's possible that you can have multiple techniques that belong to the same shader, you know. So one file might be implementing multiple techniques in there, okay? Let's see if I have a good example of this here. Not so much. Oh yeah, I know of one. Right. So here's an example. There's the keep UI .vfx. That is one shader, and you have over here two techniques for the same one shader. So one technique is going to be to save the UI, and the other one is going to be to reapply it in the stack of techniques, right? All right, so let's start. Let's start with a bit of science, and I'm gonna look for this thing here called display depth. Okay, so this technique over here, what this is going to do, right? And you're gonna see this here. This is not a technique that you want to use to make things pretty, but it's a technique that I want to use to tell you about a little bit about what is happening under the hood with Reshade or GShade. Okay, so what we're seeing here is a sort of a displayed of the information that GShade has, or that GShade is fetching inside the video card on your computer. And the information, sorry, what it's displaying is, for each pixel on your screen, it is displaying on the right side, it is displaying the depth of that pixel. So every pixel that is very close to the camera is gonna be black, and then pixels that are gonna be very far from the camera is gonna be white, and everything in between, as you can see, is representing the depth of that pixel in the environment of the game, right? And on the left side, what you're seeing is, for every pixel, it displays the information of the angle of the surface, right? So as my camera is facing this crate over here, you're gonna see it's very purple, and the surfaces that are more to the side are green. And depending on the angle relative to the camera, it's gonna give, it's gonna sort of display what is the normal of the surface. And the normal is basically the facing direction of the surface relative to the camera, right? That's some very technical information, but just knowing that stuff and sort of keeping it in mind is some good information that you might use when you're making presets from scratch. You know, understanding what the depth is and what it can do, and understanding also like the angle of surfaces, how they can affect certain effects or certain techniques. So you can see my character over here. You can see all the polygons that it's built with, and the color is sort of giving you an idea of the direction of all of these little surfaces. So you get to see a little bit of what is making a game engine. You know, all the polygons coming together, creating these surfaces. right? So this preset we're not gonna use so much, but it's nice still to look at. If you want, there's different kind of visualization. You have this sort of visualization that shows basically only the depth. And it looks like a really thick fog over everything, right? If I look like this, you start to see a bit more of the distribution of the depth of every pixel. And then you've got this view which shows you like all the angle of all the surfaces. And then you got this one that is a combination of both. I'm not gonna go more into details of this, but it's still a nice one to use if you want to see that information. Any question about, you know, the depth or the angle of surfaces in video games? As we go on, you're gonna start seeing how this depth especially is gonna affect certain things. All right, let's turn that off. Back into the default view. We're starting to have a nice little starry sky over here, which is pretty. All right, let's see. We've covered the depth. Let's look into one that is very useful. Can be a bit complicated, but it's something that a lot of people use. It's one that's called MXAO over here. I guess those two are probably the most used ones. The QINT MXAO and the MXAO FFXIV. All right. So this is the FFXIV one is kind of an older version of MXAO, but one that works really well with specifically this game. Okay. And what you're gonna see if I turn this on, you're gonna see little shadows appear along edges, right? And if I turn this one on, you're gonna see that's a bit more pronounced. You know, if you look around the stones, these sort of shadows start to appear. So MXAO is what we called a process of ambient occlusion. And ambient occlusion is a process that is faking shadows inside like nooks and crannies, basically. Any sort of little crevices. These techniques or these shaders will put some of that. Will start faking shadows in there. And this is a really strong one right now. It's probably, I probably don't want to keep the default settings for this because I think it's really strong. This one is a bit more subtle, and even like with its default values, it looks pretty good, right? If we start just by looking at the debug view over here, which is like the last properties down here, you're gonna start seeing a very bright view, but this is a good example of what ambient occlusion does, and you can start to see you know, the shadows that it creates into folds and into the nooks and crannies of surfaces, between surfaces and between objects, right? Sorry for your eyes, I know it's very bright, but we kind of need to look at that, right? And I'm gonna turn it off like this, right? And if we look at this one over here, I don't know if it has the same debug view. Yeah, it has the same kind of debug view over here. But you can see it's really strong. and it kind of shows some of the polygons or surfaces over here, which might not be something that you want to see. You know, it's not so great. So what I'm gonna do is, like, first, to work with this this technique, I usually turn on the debug view and start to work there in here to have something that looks good, and then I tweak it. I do some last finish tweaks in the proper view, right? And I'm gonna go somewhere that has a bit more geometry around. Oh, I need to fly. Alright. Somewhere around here should be good. There we go. Alright, this looks good. And here we go, back into... So now you're gonna see, like, all the shadows being applied in the corners of things. Oh, even an interior over here would be interesting. Something like this, maybe. Yeah, okay. Alright, so you have some properties over here, which is the very basic one, which is the amount. And the more you're going to put some of that, the blacker those shadows are going to look like. You probably don't want to have that much. Probably want to go with something kind of subtle like this. Just a little bit. Right? Then there's, you know, you start seeing the polygons over here. I'm going to try and adjust that like this. Sample radius, it's kind of what it means is the amount of tests that the process is going to do around surfaces to sort of detect the distance between them. The more sample, or basically this is how far it's going to test. And it affects the quality, I think, mostly of the penumbra around objects. So I'm mostly just going to play with it until I find something that is... That, like, this is something I probably don't want. To have this sort of outline around characters. If I put it too high. And if I put it too low, I'm starting to see, like, ugly things in the hair. And stuff like that. So I probably want to have something that is a nice sort of in-between. Like that. Sample count, I would say, does not have that much of an impact. If it's too low, it makes things a bit blurry. So sometimes I can right click on the thing, reset the default, and the default values usually do a pretty good job. If it doesn't do much of a change, I usually just reset them to the default value. Normal bias, I think, is how much the direction of the surface is having an effect. And this is basically a good way to see this. I don't know if we have this in here. Yeah, okay. So you see inside the sort of arch at the top of this door frame, right? The more the surfaces are similarly aligned, the less you're gonna see of a shadow between the edges as I play with the normal bias. So a very high one, you're gonna see mostly the shadows in between, like nooks that are almost like 90-degree edges. And the less you put, the more you're gonna see like the polygons or the edges between each surfaces, and you're gonna start seeing it also inside on the clothing as well. So you want to play with that in a way that it doesn't show so much of the polygons on surfaces, but still have some shadows where it makes sense for them to be. You know, you're gonna start seeing this in stairs, staircases, and arches. Like here is a good way to sort of judge how to tweak that, right? Now, smooth and normals, I think that's very important, especially for things over here. Especially for a game that has very, like, that has like really big polygons. Smooth and normal is just gonna make the edges of all these polygons less obvious. Like this, it's gonna create a smoother transition over here. Alright, and if we look at our character like that, we don't need to see all the details, but seeing the shadows, like especially between legs and like around the arms and the folds in the clothing, is something that you wanna be able to see. Maybe now I can boost up the amount a little bit, like this. Oh! Thank you for the bits. Alright, some normal bias a little bit here, back in here. I don't want to see so much that edge on the arm over here. That doesn't do much of anything really. But something like this. Sample radius might also do the trick. Let's look on my character over here. That looks pretty nice, especially like in the inside of the robe that he has. On the surface of the buildings, it's starting to look pretty good. And if I look at these characters over here, when they're close to a wall like this, there's a bit of a halo around, but not that much. So this is looking pretty nice, I think. If I turn off the debug view and I test by turning this on and off, you can see that's pretty good. Like under the arms, you can see some of the shadows over here that appear. That's pretty nice. Around the clothing as well, around the neck, and on these characters over here. You want this to be subtle, like if you're able to easily point at it and see these big black bars around things, it's probably too much. And you can even, if you want, combine different MXAO process together, one on top of the other. So you see this one and this one combined together are creating an interesting little effect. Maybe if I turn this one off and then turn this one on, I can start to tweak this one specifically. Let's see. It has kind of similar values. Sample radius. You might want to go up a little bit, like that. This is probably not something you want to change because it makes things a little fuzzy. You want to keep it at 1. The ambient occlusion amount, see? It's a bit like the other one where the amount makes things very dark. You probably don't want so much. And also the QInt QMXAO has sort of of a two-layer effect, where one is the fine scale and one is the coarse scale. It has two sort of intensity, and so you can probably first work with the coarse and then tweak the fine one for something a little better, but that looks pretty good. It shows a bit of the polygons on the clothing. Then this is sort of an intensity multiplier for all of them. Mostly like trying some of the sliders here is gonna give you a good idea of what this does eventually. You'll sort of get an instinct for it. This one also has a fade start end, basically depending on how far the distance of the surface are, the more they're going to be applied. Like if over here you can see some of the staircase in the background. If I start doing something like this, things that are further are going to be affected by the ambient occlusion as well. So you probably don't want to go too far with this. This seems reasonable. And if I turn off that... Oh, a bit of lighting here is going to be nice. Alright, so this is very subtle again, without the effect. Or with the effect. And then combined with the other one. That's a bit dark, but it's interesting. It feels better with it than without it. It's less flat, I think. Yeah, that's nice. As you walk around, you can sort of see a little bit of the effect on the clothing. Alright, I guess we've covered ambient occlusion. Let's look at everyone's favorite, depth of field, which also known as DOF. And there's a lot of those. Oh, wait, before I move on to depth of field, is there any question about MXAO or ambient occlusion in general?
I am just studiously taking so many notes.
If you taken too many notes?
Big same.
Are you
There
writing
is
a
no
whole
such
book?
thing.
I mean, I honestly, from a PS4 perspective,
Yeah.
this is actually really good. Just because we don't have this side on a console side. So it's really nice to see how deep, GSHADE and
Yeah.
G-posing can go. And I mean, it gives us I definitely appreciate the screenshots across both communities, but it definitely gives you a deeper insight.
Mm-hmm.
So in the event that I ever feel like I want to go to PC,
Yeah, like I said,
I at least have an idea of what to do.
if you're on the fence on getting a PC or paying the price for it, and you're wondering is it worth it, maybe this will help you make a decision. And I don't know if there is this on PS4 as well, but I think
isn't.
there isn't. Like the
No.
Okay.
No, there's nothing.
No,
There's no
normally for
graphics at
console
all.
players,
You would have
No.
to use like something like a third-party thing like Photoshop or GIMP or anything like that to enhance
Yeah.
the
Okay,
picture.
but not in the game.
No,
No.
there's nothing in
No.
the game. No.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing in the game. Normally, PS4 players just have to pull the screenshot down
Okay.
and upload it somewhere else, and then make all the tweaks and stuff to it. We don't have anything on the actual console itself, that would allow you to be able to do this level of work.
Yeah, not this level for sure. Like if you're on PC and you don't have reshade or GShade, there's still some values that are similar. Let me find it somewhere in here. Here we are. The ambient screen space ambient occlusion here. It's basically the same kind of process that we just looked at, but it's part of the Final Fantasy game itself. All right. So if you turn that off, or let me actually turn off GShade, and if you start seeing a bit of the difference, especially like in the corners of the building over here, you start to see that the game itself has its own ambient occlusion. And you can have both if you want. You can probably just use the standard one from the game and then use the GShade one on top, because GShade happens on top of what the game renders, right? You can see like on top of the menus themselves, you can see the ambient occlusion process from GShade. If I turn off GShade, you can see that this is basically applied on top of the game. So maybe it's best to turn it off entirely and then just use the GShade one or the reshade one, basically. It depends maybe on the kind of frame rate you want to have, because all of these effects together can affect the frame rate, depending on what kind of hardware you have for your computer. All right, let's move on to depth of field. Over here. Oh, I haven't checked, by the way. Do I have the chat cover on? Maybe I forgot. I'm just gonna have a quick look. Hopefully there isn't all the chat covers together at the same time. Hold on a minute. What's this? That's voice chat. Chat cover. Alright, here we go. Maybe I don't want chat cover because then it's gonna hide the menu. So I'm just gonna stay off of chat. At least we're not like in the city hub or anything. And I'm just gonna stay in general. That's fine. There we go. Alright, moving on. DOF. I'm gonna turn. Actually, I'm just gonna leave these on, because we're gonna start mixing things together. All right, DOF. There's a lot of different depth of field effects, and they all kind of work differently with their own little quirks, because they've all been programmed by different people who have their own idea of how depth of field should work, or also maybe depending on certain games. But ADOF is a really nice one. The Marty DOF is kind of old, and there's been it's good, but there's been some other like different ones or better ones depending on the circumstance. One that I use often and I quite like is this cinematic DOF. And you're gonna start seeing already some of the blurring effect that it has on like the background, things that are very far away behind your character. Also, like there's a sort of a mouse pointing feature on this, where depending on where your mouse is pointing, the focus is gonna happen there, right? So now I'm pointing at my character, it's focusing that character. Pointing at the background, it's mostly the background that is in focus behind. And you're gonna see there's gonna be a nice transition as you go from one point to the other. And this is where the depth information is being used to create that effect, right? I'm gonna do something to the top. Okay. All right, so now I have DOF and ambient occlusion. What I want to do at this point, and you're gonna start seeing this, is that the ambient occlusion is being applied on top of the depth of field. Like the depth of field is being calculated first, and then the ambient occlusion is being calculated on top. And you can see it has some really weird effect on the character where, well, the character is blurry, but the ambient occlusion is not blurry, right? And that goes to show that the order, oops, I'm gonna turn that off. The order of your technique has an importance. Since the depth of field is being applied first, and then the ambient occlusion is being applied on top, the ambient occlusion does not receive the blurring effect of the depth of field. So in Reshade or GShade, you can hold and drag effects and change the order of how they are applied. So by dragging techniques on top of each other and changing the order of the techniques, you get different results. So now you can see my ambient occlusion right now is being applied first. Basically, first this is applied, second this is applied, and third the DOF is applied. And you can see that the blurring is now affecting correctly the ambient occlusion. It gets treated correctly because that's a better order for them to be, right? And the way to think about this is that the ambient occlusion is sort of a process that is applied to surfaces. And the depth of field is something that is applied according to depth from surfaces all the way to your camera. So it kind of makes sense for the surface process to be treated first, and then the distance process to be treated on top of that. Hopefully that makes sense to you and it's not too confusing. But definitely the order of techniques can have a big impact, depending on, especially if it's working with depth and if it's working with surfaces. Alright, so now we're gonna tweak the depth of field a little bit. I'm gonna turn off the mouse-driven autofocus. So this way, wherever my mouse is, it's not gonna change automatically now. Alright? And I'm gonna turn on this feature over here. Gonna move that a little bit. So show out of focus plane overlay. Alright, and so when I'm clicking on things, you're gonna start seeing sort of a debug view information of where your focus is currently pointing at, and like parts of the picture that are being in focus and out of focus, right? So what I want to do right now is play with the focus point, right? And as I play with this, you're gonna see this sort of purple or pink cursor move horizontally over here. So I want to put that on my character, then vertically put that somewhere on here. So this determines that the focus point is sort of pointing over here, and whatever depth that surface has is going to be the depth at which the focus is going to happen. Right? So as I hold the mouse anywhere, it doesn't matter. It shows me this debug information. The blue bands that you see, this is where you have perfect focus clarity, and the white area is all the things that are entirely out of focus. So that's why everything that is behind my character right now is very blurry, while everything that is near the sort of this blue band over here is things that are going to be perfectly in focus, like really sharp. And of course the UI right now is being affected by this because the UI does not have any depth information into it. So whatever surface is behind the UI is gonna get the same treatment as those surface. So this is why the UI over here is really blurry. You can see part of the UI right now on my character. It's really nice, but as it moves back, it starts to get blurred with the background because the UI happens to be on top of the background in this situation. Okay, so autofocus transition speed, that is the speed at which the focus is moving. So if I'm using the mouse focus and I'm going from background to character, you're sort of seeing that it sort of gradually switches the focus between the two. If I want this to be absolutely instantaneous, I can like max the speed and you're gonna see like the sort of a transition is gone and now it's really instant, the change. I personally prefer to keep just the default value because it's kind of interesting. But sometimes if it's moving from a really far plane to a very close, it can take more time that you care for. So you can just boost that up a little bit. If you're not using autofocus over here, this means that, see now I don't see the pink cursor or the blue lines. Alright, so this means that once I've turned off autofocus, I have complete manual control of the plane. Alright, so I can just move this, so you're gonna see that I have manual control over where the focus is. But this doesn't adjust well depending on where my camera is. So if I move my camera, you can sort of see that the focus is really camera relative. It's according to the depth from the camera. So it's better to use autofocus and either use mouse driven. So after you've done your setting, then you can use your mouse to specify where you want your focus to happen. Or if you want to play with settings and not have your mouse update constantly, you can just turn that off and then use these values over here to specify, like once you've done putting your character where you want him and the camera where you want it, then it's a good time to play with your focus settings over here. Something like that, right? Then these two properties over here, focal length and aperture, these are very like real-world photography terminology. And I'm not an expert real-world photograph, and I don't play with real cameras so much and lenses, so I can't really tell you exactly what these represents. If you're familiar with what these terminology mean, you're more welcome than to type about it in the chat. But as far as someone who's making a preset is concerned, it's best to just go ahead and play with them. And what you're gonna see is, as I reduce this, like some of the planes are gonna shrink and grow. And that's gonna affect the quality of the amount of blur how do I say this? Like the further the things are, the more they're gonna be blurry or affected by the blur. And by changing this, you're gonna have a control of where the maximum is reaching. And these two will affect. Like now, if I really boost this, you start to see the blue band over here. It's gonna be larger. So there's gonna be much more sharpness on my character. Like this, and the out of focus now is really far away. And I can tweak it back a little bit over here. Like this. Move into the sun a little bit. So this is starting to look pretty good. My character is in focus, and the background is a little blurry. Maybe I don't need Um, yeah, right now the UI is being affected by the shader because the UI is on top of the background, which is the furthest thing. But if the UI is now really close to the camera, and as I do this, you're gonna see it's gonna start to overlap the blurry parts and the focus parts. Because the UI does not have this information of where it sits in terms of depth. It's not being treated at like the full close thing. Oh boy. Let's dance, everybody. Thank you for the gifts.
Woohoo! Thank you.
All right. Now
Oh wow! Thank you for the sub.
if I move down a bit more, and I'm gonna give me more space over here because there's a lot. Like this is intimidating, right? There's a lot of properties, which you can do. Like if you don't want to be like disturbed too much by the amount of stuff, you can start to minimize things like this, just so you can sort of concentrate on the important bits. Right, so if I want to turn this back on over here, or turn it off and not worry about it, I can just, like, clean up a little bit. Alright, so now here I have some control on the quality of the blur. Like if I want the distance to be very blurry, I can boost that over here. If I want the near blur, like this character right now, oops. He's much closer to the camera, so he's a bit more blurry than my character. Oh, it's raining. So the near plane, so things that are closer, you can control the quality of the blur for the things that are much closer. And now he's like super blurry because I boosted that up. But if you don't want any of the near objects to be as blurry as the black background, you can set it to 0, basically. All right. But if he's in the center now, where my focus was, he's gonna steal the focus. So as long as this little pink cross is not on top of him, he's gonna be considered, and you see like he's all white over here. He's being considered as part of the near plane, the out of focus but near plane. Blur quality doesn't have that much of an impact, I assume. You probably just want to leave it to default mostly. The bokeh, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but whatever. This is sort of affects, if I have an example over somewhere, because it's kind of gray outside right now, I would need to see something that's bright and shiny. Maybe in the interior? I got some lamps in here. These lamps are have a bit of bloom on them, but maybe it'll give us a good example. Not so much. I don't really have a good like in-game example of what this does, but basically for objects that are out of focus, especially like if a good example is a night sky, you know, the sky is really far and it's full of stars, and the stars are gonna start creating these sort of blobs of light, or like this sort of little bubble effect. This is the bokeh effect, basically. And it's sad that I don't have an example. Maybe you've seen this effect on other people's screenshots, where where the stars in the sky are that are very shiny have this sort of they all look like little white bubbles everywhere. You can tweak how much of that sort of bubbling effect, how intense that effect is, you know. Like if I set this to 0, probably I wouldn't have this effect and all the night sky would be blurry. But then if I boost it, like you would start seeing all the stars are just sort of really shiny and bubbly looking. But it's kind of sad that I don't have an example right now because it's all gray and rainy. Maybe I can actually go and find a place. Well, it's not night anywhere at the moment. I have an idea. Because I really want to show this. So I think we can... Yeah! See, now we have some stars in the background over here. And my focus right now is... Oop, let's turn that on. So my focus is on my character, and all the background is out of focus. Start boosting this. And you might start seeing, depending on this. It's too blurry, I think. And there might not be enough stars. Bar plane, max blur. This to 0. Doesn't seem to have much effect in this case either. There might be other depth of field effect that have... Let's try actually. There we go. Nope. Not so much. Bokeh intensity. Is it giving me something? Not really. Oh well, that was a bad example. But bokeh is kind of a... It's an interesting part of depth of field, but what you really want from depth of field usually is the blurriness of the things that are behind your characters. Alright, let's get back in there. We're taking a lot of time actually to explain all of this stuff, so I might want to move on to something else. Do you guys have any question about depth of field?
I feel like this is gonna end up to be like a series.
Right?
I'm starting with the most used and most useful stuff. So, and I might want to move somewhere else right now.
I mean, to be honest, this is actually really good.
Okay.
So, I mean, if nothing else, this can definitely turn into a series of just focusing on GSHADE.
Well, we have another hour. I think I have enough time to cover a lot of things. This is starting to look nice. This area. Hopefully I'm not revealing any spoilers right now. I'm gonna look somewhere else. Oh, look, the moon. Perfect.
The moon.
It's a very
Please look forward to
normal,
it.
regular moon, right? Okay.
Moon is sus.
Moon's haunted, y'all.
Let me remove this. So right, and we got ambient occlusion, depth of field. Keep those on top for now. Let's look at fog. All right, there's a couple of interesting fog effects over here. I think the best one is probably adaptive fog. All right, and you're gonna start seeing that this is making everything foggy, which is what the name says, right? And basically, the further the surfaces are, the further the things are, the more they're going to be affected by the fog color. If I want to put a red fog, I can, you know? And you see my character in front is not affected by this fog, but everything behind, as the further it goes, the more affected it is by the fog. And then I got a lot of these parameters here to control how intense the fog is. This is maximum. So we're progressively going into a pure red color. If I want something blue, I can go with blue or something darker. Maybe I want something black here. This is very spooky. This is some Silent Hill business right here. And I can control. I'm gonna keep it black like this. It might be interesting. And then just sort of adjust the intensity of it. I mean, the game already has its own natural fog. Like if I turn that on automatically, the game has its sort of normal. Oh, the moon is really nice. It's normal fog, but you can apply yours on top of it. Like that. Or maybe I want this to actually be really white or gray. And then not that intense. And the fog has a sort of a bit of a bloom effect on it. So like if there's a lamp, like you see a lot of those lights in the background. They have this sort of glow around them that is affected by the fog. So you can adjust the threshold, which is like at one point there's a really bright color starts to bloom. You can control that over here. So the higher you are, the brighter the color needs to be in order to create a bloom. And then this is how bloomy it is. And how far does the bloom reach, I suppose. But this doesn't have that much of an impact, I suppose. And then if I want to go to a white color, bluish, even maybe yellow, makes things look a little sickly. There's not a lot of properties here. The fog start is where the fog is actually going to start. So if I move this away, you see that it basically makes the fog go away. And as you progressively make it lower, it means that the fog is really starting at where the camera is in the environment. You know? This makes it look a little bit gold, like a sort of a golden fog kind of thing. So maybe I want the fog to start a little bit behind my character. And if I want, and this is gonna be interesting, if I have a very high fog curve like this, you're gonna see the fog here is no fog at all, and over here it's really foggy, right? I'm gonna start moving maybe around here. Now the fog is like a wall that is following me. So you can see it like boosting the fog curve all the way to top can help you define where the fog is actually starting. So I can say, well, my fog is starting somewhere over here. And then I'm gonna adjust the curve to lower it down so that it's sort of, you can control how gradual the fog is from that point on. Alright. If you have something that is very dark, like so, we're gonna do the same thing here, where curve is gonna be very high. Let's start. Oh wait, maybe I want to remove some of the bloom. Alright, remove all of the bloom. So this is where it starts. This is a very thick black fog. And I'm gonna lower the curve so it progresses further and further. And at some point you might just like do a couple of clicks like this. And you're gonna see the night sky over here react to this. Yeah, when you play with some very extreme values that are like out of what is natural, you can start to create some really funky psychedelic effects, and then those can be pretty fun to play with as well. And if you've made a big mistake and you're completely lost into what you've done over here, you can always right-click and reset the default. And you confirm, and it's just gonna bring all the values under that shader. It's gonna bring all the values back to default, and you can start over basically to tweak back to maybe what you wanted. Maybe less intensity. Like this. So this is adaptive fog with a bit of a bloom feature in it. Oh wow, that has an interesting effect on those crystals in the background. Huh. It makes them look kind of blobby. So maybe I want to boost the threshold. Not so much power on the bloom, because it's kind of creating a weird effect with the bloom that is already part of the game. Something like this. Maybe I want this fog to start a bit further. Low curve. Something really not so thick. And keep it just... maybe it's some... just darken the background. Like that. That looks kind of interesting. And ominous. Alright, active to top. Brings everything that you've turned on currently. You press active to top and it just brings it back all the way to the top. And in this case, I think having depth of field on top of fog, does that produce much of a difference? If I invert both of them, doesn't do that much of a difference, because they are very similar process in terms of using the depth to produce an effect, and whether one happens on top of the other might not have that much of a difference. But you do want to have fog happen after MXAO, because if you start putting MXAO after fog, like that, and you might start seeing a weird effect, like if your character is starting to reach inside into the fog, the MXAO is going to apply on top, and it's going to be weird looking. Usually you always want your MXAO stuff to always be applied first, unless you have some certain process like the keep UI you might want to have before the MXAO. Alright, let's look at bloom. Not blur, bloom. Is there any question about fog No questions about the fog. Yeah, the preset, like, as I've been changing things, alright? This is my, like, the things that have been saved into the preset file, potato2, over here, alright? Like, they've all been saved progressively as I'm changing. Every time I change something, it's being saved into the preset file. If I go into this other preset over here, you start seeing some of that bokeh effect that I was talking about. But, like, as I switch to different presets, you're gonna see when I load back this preset, all the things, the settings that I had set up, they're all saved in there into that preset. So that's what a preset is, basically a file that is keeping all of your tweaks and changes and whatever things you turn on or off are saved in, are the information that is saved into that preset file. All right, let's move on to Bloom. Bloom is really nice. There's again a lot of different kinds of bloom. I've not tried all of them. One that I'm familiar and fond of is Magic Bloom over here because it doesn't have a whole lot of parameters, but still produce some interesting results. If you have too much things open down here, what you can do is do a collapse all. Alright, and it's gonna collapse everything down, and then you can just reopen whichever you want down here and concentrate on that stuff. Alright, so bloom, bloom, bloom. Get rid of that. I'm gonna get rid of fog as well, and all of this stuff. And the OF. And I was saying Magic Bloom. Actually, let me get these back on. And then bring everything to top, like this. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave them on there. Alright, so what Bloom does is that it picks the bright colors in your picture, and it sort of inflates them into this sort of like really bright bloom, basically. The game does some of its own bloom, but you can apply more of it on top, right? Just gonna go back to what I had here. Alright, so bloom intensity. You can start to see what it does, and the brighter the colors, the more of the light is gonna bleed out of these bright area. And if I go and boost bloom threshold, that means that only the brightest colors in the screen are gonna create a bloom, right? So if I really put the max intensity over here, I can even go further than this. Let's go, I want to put like 30 on there. You can do it, but it might not necessarily have the effects that you want. Alright, so I'm gonna go over here, and you can see on my character right now, there's these really sort of bright highlight because of the light right next to me, right? And the more intensity, the more that sort of light is gonna bleed off of these bright colors. And if I really put bloom threshold low, it means that the necessity of a color to be bright in order to produce a bloom is gonna be lower. And so more of the picture is gonna start bleeding that light. So you probably want to keep that bloom threshold kinda high. So now more of my, like if I go this way, you can see the color on my face, and even like the very, almost the entire screen is getting more affected. But the higher I put the threshold, the more the bloom is gonna be limited to those very highlighted parts of the picture. All right. Dirt intensity. I think if I remember what this does, if it produces a kind of a texture that is affected by the bloom. Oh, now there's lightning. It's probably not so great to be testing bloom under lightning. Let me go somewhere else. Let's go somewhere else here. You can see the bloom is also affecting the UI. Like the loading screen has this sort of glowy effect on top of it. Alright, we're back here. Which is nice because now we have these lights that are gonna be good examples. Maybe I can go in first person actually. Alright, that looks good. And again, you can see the bloom intensity over here is maximum. The threshold makes... here we start seeing the dirt intensity. I don't know if you see it well on the stream, but you start seeing all these little blobs everywhere as if the camera lens was sort of dirty and covered in grime. As you boost the dirt intensity, you're gonna see more of this sort of dust in the lens effect. But you're gonna see less of it the more you increase the bloom threshold. But it's interesting, like as you move around the lights, and I don't know if that's gonna show well on stream, but you're gonna see some of those little dusty textures created by the bloom. If you don't want any of that, you can just remove it. Exposure is just gonna make things generally brighter where the bloom is. So maybe a combination of intensity and exposure is gonna make things brighter. The adaptation speed, this is according to depending on what you're looking at and how much bright colors there are in the screen, is going to make this filter adapt itself quicker or slower. You might not want to have a speed too high because then you might see some flickering. Luckily we don't see a lot of it because it's night. It's not very bright out. But, you know, maybe just keep it the default in this case. Same for sensitivity. That might affect that adaptation. Since we're at night right now, we're not going to see much of it. This, I think, is specifically if you're using the Keep UI. Maybe I can actually use that. Keep UI, or rather UI, keep restore. Active to top. I'm gonna take the Keep UI and put it all the way on the top. So this is where it's gonna record the game's UI. Right? So you can see now the UI isn't blurry or anything. And if I turn that off, right? So this is a technique that will sort of copy the UI at this level and paste it back on top at the end of all your processes. right? And now you can see the UI here is a bit, if I can maybe look at the map. Yeah, this is a good example where you sort of see the map being affected by all of these processes. So with Keep UI, you sort of can record the UI at this point and then paste it back on top of everything, and then you don't have the weird effects affecting your UI. And if you have like depth of field, for example, let me get rid of the map. And you can see the UI is not going to be as blurry. If you put this first and this last, this is going to fix your UI. So this way you can actually play the game with your reshade or your GSHADE active. It's not going to make the UI all yucky. So I think Bloom was pretty much covered. I don't know if anyone has questions about the bloom. Exposure and the thresholds. Ooh, that's a lot. No questions. Okay. So as you start adding effect, like blurry and things can get blurry and soft and like bloomy, you might want to start making things a little sharper. So there's a lot of different process here to make the picture sharper. And the effect is kind of subtle for some of them. And it might actually not show on the stream video. But if you find that your picture or your character is a bit too blurry, especially on some of the details on their clothing, like here I have like some interesting like detail in the textile of the character. If I want to keep that really sharp, that nice sharpness, especially also in the hair, you can use fast sharpen is a very simple one, where you can, you know, I don't need to explain these so much other than play with them and see what they do. Otherwise, the adaptive sharpen is one that is really nice, and you can just sort of play with the strength of how sharp it makes the picture. And like right now what I'm seeing, and I don't know if that's what you're seeing on your end, but now like the hair is a lot less blurry, and some of the texture on the clothing is a bit sharper as well. So that's one to play with. All of this advanced stuff I would say stay out of, because I have played like a lot with these things trying to figure it out, and they sort of like, I just stopped and say I don't get any of this. Because the effect is so subtle, it's hard to determine what they're doing. So adding some sharpness, you got this option over here, and I kind of like adaptive sharpen mostly for the kind of result it gives without having to put a lot of parameters in there. All right, we have what? Half an hour left? Let's see. Let's start dealing with colors. One that I like to play with is levels, right? And levels is kind of simple in the sense that especially in Final Fantasy, because sometimes it looks a bit gray as a game. Level, what it does, it allows you to control what we call the black point and the white point, alright? And it makes, like, this is basically the default Final Fantasy look, right? So as you raise the black point, dark colors in the picture are going to start to blend together into a more absolute dark, I would say. And you're going to see the effect as I increase this. You're going to have a lot more dark in the picture, and everything that is like darker in the background is going to start blending into this one dark color, right? You want to know how to get GSHADE. You can really simply just go to gshade.com. They have their own website where you can download it there. There's an installer, and it'll take you through the install process, and it's actually a lot easier to install than just the normal reshade. And the other benefit is that you can, with one GShade install, you can easily apply it to multiple games at the same time. So you can just choose which games are going to be affected by your GShade effects. Yeah, gshade.com simply. Yeah, and your levels, same way as you can make the dark things darker, you can make the bright things brighter by lowering white point. And so all the bright things are going to start to merge together into this, into the brightness, basically. And so with this, you can make a picture that is much more contrasted. As you can see, with and without it, the game by default has a lot of gray and fogginess to it. Levels will sort of help you sort of tweak all of that. And what's interesting also is it has a feature to highlight the clipping, is what we call it. Clipping is, you're going to start seeing some of the blue things over here. It's basically a debug view that tells you all the dark colors that get merged into pure black over here. So as you increase that, you're gonna see like more and more of the dark colors get turned into pure black, and this is gonna help you find that. Sometimes you don't want too much of it, you know, so just keeping a little bit of that is fine. And then you're gonna have your white clipping over here. Right, so all of the colors that are very close to being white. So yellow right now, that's like pure white. And red is very close to pure white, so you probably want to keep that to a minimum. Like this. This is just a bit of a helper. Wow, now my bloom is really going crazy, because suddenly it has a lot more white to work with. Let's go active to top. Maybe I want to put levels before bloom. That's a bit more interesting. The game is very bloomy. Even the sky is bloomy right now. You can see some of the blue of the sky is sort of invading the dark areas. That's very nice, actually. I really love bloom. It looks dreamy. Put on your sunglasses. Let me collapse all of that. go back into Magic Bloom. Lower the intensity a bit. Alright. And the threshold a bit more. I don't need any of the dirt. Maybe lower the exposure a bit. There we go. That seems a little bit more balanced. And the game is not looking so gray. And it's a bit more contrasted, I would say. So that's levels for you. Now another one that I like that deals with color. It's a very simple one. It's tone map, right? The most simple one, I guess, is this one, tone map.fx. And this is gonna do. And maybe it's a good thing to put this one at the end. Alright, restore UI. I want to bring that up here. Alright, tone map. Tone map is gonna give you some extra color or lightness control. Like saturation, you can make your game very colorful, or you can make it a lot less colorful, almost black and white. But saturation, you can play with that. I think saturation is something I've talked about in another video about like Snapseed. So you can have some of those effects directly into Reshade over here. Exposure is gonna make everything like ooh super bright, not so bright. Gamma is not such a great thing to play with, I guess, because it makes things very weird. If you exaggerate, you usually want to leave that to default. And bleach is also dealing with, you know, the brightness of things. I usually just play with exposure and saturation in this case. Like that. Let's see. We could also look at one I like is Vignette. Alright. What Vignette does is maybe it's better to see most of the sky with that. What Vignette does is it creates a sort of a darkened, it darkens the screen around the edge, okay? Almost like if you're looking through some kind of projection or lens. And right now it's subtle. You might not even see it on the video compression on the stream. But if I play with its values, you can see now, you can see very intense values what it does. You probably don't want to go that much like this. Radius, you know, is basically like a circle. You probably want to go not so much amount. It basically dims the corners of the screen, gives it a bit of a cinematic effect. Slope is just like the higher you are, the less gradient you're gonna have. You probably don't want to be like so high. And this is like a really ugly vignette, by the way. So I'm just playing with those to sort of give you an idea. But this is sort of a TV style vignette. This is really like darkening the edges of the screen as if it was an old style monitor, which can be an interesting effect. I've used it before. These are just like sort of options that are pre-existing, different styles basically. But I like usually to just keep with the original and play around like with this, like that. Gives this nice little cinematic effect. And one thing that Vignette, however, has a kind of a bad effect of creating bending. Bending is something. I don't think we have a good sky here to see the effect, but depending on where we are, let's see if I can go back here. So we're gonna have a good example of what bending is. Yeah, it gives this sort of semi-closed eyelid sort of effect. Oh, it's full of clouds here as well. Let's go somewhere else. I want a nice sky. It's thundering. Camp Drybone, maybe. Hopefully it's not all cloudy over there as well. Show me. Oh yeah, I think we have a very nice guy now. Over here. Look at how shiny everything is. Oh yeah, like big difference. This is our preset. This is without the preset. And now we have a nice view of the sky over here, which is what I wanted. There we go. Very nice.
That is really nice.
Alright, so with our preset we have a lot of glow. And with the vignette, maybe I don't want that much glow right now. The fog. Oh wow, levels is really boosting everything right now. I don't want that much of a white point over here. Okay, now I think we have a good example, and I don't know if it shows again on the video compression over there, but when you're dealing with bending is something that happens especially like in color gradients. Things like a sunset or like a foggy sky like this creates a gradient of color, let's say from the middle or from this point of the screen all the way to the edge. And as you're gonna start seeing bands, like now fog is coming in and rain. Oh great. I mean, no, I can see some banding happening over here. And especially, wow. Everything's great. Everything's great. My example is destroyed. Oh boy. Let's go somewhere sunny. Please be sunny, Airport. I need my sky.
I enjoy how the game is trying to thwart.
Yeah, it's
all of
just
your
sabotaging
I know, right?
my educational value.
The game is like, I see you trying to make a preset.
There
Let
we
me stop
go.
you right there.
Is it?
Oh, you want? Let me give you rain. But
It does that, doesn't it? It has a tendency to do that. Game is being maybe the water is a good example over here. I don't know. I need something else. Hiragane. I just want a nice sky, please. Nice clear sky. My example on banding. Oh, I think this is gonna work. I can't fly here though. We're gonna go to the beach. Go to the beach. Yeah, not bad at all. Oops. Splooch. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty good. And no, it's not gonna change weather now. Alright, so we have a really nice gradient of color. We have a sort of a semi-dark blue at the top, and we're sort of gradually going towards bright white, or almost very bright blue over here. So this kind of gradient on computer screens, and when you take a screenshot, you're gonna see bands of color that is caused by the lack of precision in the amount of color that the picture can produce, right? So there's so much of a gradual progress in here, but there's not enough color, not enough variety of colors to express all that gradient. So you start seeing these little stripes that show up, and as the sun rises, you're probably gonna see more of these stripes. And especially as well, since we're using Vignette, Vignette tends to create a lot of banding also. So yeah, so because of the gradient of like the dark color in the corner and the bright in the middle, and then the graduation towards blue, you're gonna see some of those bands, right? And Vignette can cause that. And one way to deal with bands is deband, right? Right now the QInt deband is very new. I haven't tried it. It doesn't seem to do much currently, but deband usually is a pretty good solution. And you want your deband to be usually at the end of the stack, especially after Vignette, right? And what deband does is that it detects the banding or the lines, and it creates sort of a fuzziness along that line to make it disappear as much as possible. And there's an interesting debug view over here. It's very ugly, but it represents the band detection that the system has, and it sort of puts a larger emphasis on the bands that it found, right? And so you can see better like the banding over here. And again, probably on your end, on the video stream, you probably don't see it, but it might be that when you try and play with GSHADE or ReShade, and you're dealing with these sort of gradient of color, that you on your end will notice these sort of bands appearing, you know, like in your sunset or your sky or whatever. And deband is gonna help you get rid of these stripes. And this is way too much deband. You can sort of, I can see some of the noise over here, but the default values will do a pretty good job. But then if you play a lot with it, you're gonna have a better effect of getting rid of the bands. But sometimes it might start blurring things together, and you might not want to have that, you know, because the more you put, the less details you get on the water. So I would say deband is really useful, but it's probably best to keep the default values that it has, and it'll do a pretty good job just with the default values. Yeah, and as you can see right now, I got a lot of banding in the sky. And you might not see it, but there's a bit of a banding caused by the vignette. If I turn the vignette off, I'm gonna have, like, whoa, that's a lot of banding in the sky. But this is, like I said, this is just the debug view. You probably not got, whoa, what the hell? Oops. Did I make, I think I made an error. That's the QInt. I don't want to play with that. I want to play with deband. Okay, here we go. None. That's better. Error, error. Alright, we only have about 10 minutes left, and it's actually pretty good. I've covered everything I wanted to cover except one, which is gonna be my last thing to cover, and that's perfect. Called Display Mod. Alright, and this is a new one. And it's one I like very much. And what this does... Alright, get ready for it. It's pretty amazing. So, all you peeps out there who like to take... let me just get there. There we go. Like to take vertical screenshots like that. But you don't wanna break your neck trying to, you know, find the perfect angle. Display mod is gonna help you by giving yourself a nice little rotation here to sort of fix your neck problems, right? And you probably want to go more with something like this. Right. So here we go. I got my vertical pictures with this. Very nice. Though my UI is also going to be rotated, which is probably not something that I want. What I do in this case. Oh, oh boy, that's much complicated. There we go. Let's bring it back to normal. And then bring the scale back to normal. Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that the restore UI is on top, right after display mod, right? And then when I go back to my vertical picture, like this, and I go back to display mod and set the rotation back to -90. It's gonna keep my UI is still gonna be there. You're gonna see the shadow of the UI that is sort of where the UI has been sort of cut and pasted, if you want. But at least you're gonna be able to still play around with that. And if I want to, you know, put the scale back to what it was, like this, and just hide the UI like that. I can like take a screenshot like this if I want, which is quite nice, but I prefer to use this technique as a form of preview, just not having my head tilted all the time. And once I have, you know, the angle that I want and the picture that I want, I can just go back, turn it off, take my screenshot, and then I have my vertical shot saved. And if I want to rotate it like with the full resolution outside, like outside the game, like in Windows or whatever, I can do that. But that's a very very useful one to use. Or you can just take your picture like that and then remove the black bands on the side if you want. Because maybe that's just a perfect size for you and that's enough for you. That's fine. Which is really nice, you know, when you're trying to make like a glamour shot of your whatever you're wearing. Maybe a bit of zoom over here. Very nice. And then I need some DOF in here. That's not bad. Oh wait, yeah, my DOF right now is probably being all wonky because of the rotation. I just need to make sure that everything is on top. Over here, my DOF I want right here. There we go. That looks nice. And my DOF, I want more blur in the far plane. This looks pretty good. And yeah, got a pretty nice little picture here. Very bright and shiny. Oh, maybe get rid of my cursor. There we go. And yeah, this is our very own little custom preset over here, where we, you know, we save the UI, put some ambient occlusion on the surface, have some depth of field between, you know, the background and the character. We've adjusted the levels, to make things a bit brighter and less gray. On the top of that, we've put a bit more sharpness into the picture. And the tone map right now is not so doing much, I suppose. Maybe just making things more colorful with a lot of saturation. A bit less exposure, maybe. Like that. And then, in case over here, D-band is probably not really necessary, since we don't have a lot of gradients of color, I suppose. Our display mod is helping us, you know, save our necks, literally. And then we restore UI, but in this case, I don't really need it because I'm not using it. And that is our custom reshade or GSHADE or GSHADE or reshade or whatever shade preset that we've made from scratch with a lot of properties. I've been doing a lot of talking, and I've not drunk much water, so my throat is a bit dry right now. Ugh. But
please hydrate.
Yeah, please hydrate.
Hydrate.
Yes, I am hydrating.
It'll make us make a hydrate command.
What would that do? Would like would a robot crash into my room and just force water into my face?
Literally checks her water bottle at your face.
All right. Well,
Anything is possible.
if anyone has questions before we close the stream, now's the time. Any question about GSHADE or the difference between GSHADE and reshade, or I don't know, how to make the text bigger? Here we go. Let's make the text bigger. Oh, that's very big. Let's get back. Get back over here. This is the big text that your grandma wanted.
Oh god. Back in
Or
my day, tech was not that big.
and yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned things, or that you will remember some of those learned things, because that was a lot.
But nice thing about it though is even though it was a lot, we upload our VODs into our YouTube channel all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you missed it or wanted to ever go back and watch and pause in certain areas just to kind of take notes or see what happened, you can always visit our YouTube channel and be able to go back in there and watch the VOD all over again. Give it likes. Even say you did an awesome job in the comments.
Share it with everyone, all your friends. The internet remembers, and we appreciate your participation, and we hope it's going to help you, discover new things, make better screenshot,
Or even explore something different.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
like I said, it's the deep holes rabbit hole goes deep and everywhere. So, you never know. Even if it's something that you think you're not going to play with later on, it at least give you a better understanding of the effort that it takes, even from a PC side or even, from console side, the effort that it takes to take those pictures and to give you a story that we hope you all enjoy as you're experiencing your journey through Eorzea.
And even if you play Final Fantasy just on PS4, maybe you have some PC games that you still play on PC. You can probably there might be some compatibility issue, but generally, any sort of PC game that is using DirectX or like Windows to render, you can use GSHADE or Reshade with that, and you can apply your effects on top of what the game renders and make it look prettier, make it look the way you want. You don't have to. You can get very creative. You don't have to make something that's necessarily pretty, but you can make something that just looks really funky, right? Like this is some of the crazy stylized effect that I've created by tweaking things.
Ooh.
And this is all
Like
with
a slasher movie,
playing
70s
with
slasher movie.
fogs and different kind of effects and color modification. You can do some really really interesting things.
Cyberpunk much?
Oops.
I mean, definitely something to play around.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need Final Fantasy 14 to play around with these kind of effects. You can do it in the other games. In fact, it's encouraged. Just because, you know, 14 is a very immersive game, but there are plenty of other games that have just as much of a robust environment for you to explore, creating presets or, creating a different look in their world and then sharing it with everyone else. Because I know we love to see other games as well, not just 14, even though we primarily focus on 14.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I think this is gonna be that for tonight. Again, I hope you enjoyed. I
Yeah.
hope you will come back. We still have a lot planned. We have a lot of ideas for things to show on the coming up streams. You'll see.
We hope you all enjoyed. Yep. We hope you all enjoyed it. We hope you all have fun. And with that, definitely follow us on our social media. We talk all the time, especially on our Instagrams and our Twitter. So if you want to show us your screenshots, you want to sit there and just say hi, please do so. Follow us on our social medias. I promise you someone is going to always answer you. Same thing with our Discord. We have a very large Discord community, but we're super friendly. So please by all means, come in, say hello, and explore to see what we have to offer. Today's host was Red. So if you want to learn a little bit more about him, connect with him, follow him on his Twitter account. As I said, any of us in the community are available anytime to be able to talk, give you some tools and tips, anything that's going to help you be able to understand G posing. and help you create even better shots. And with that being said, we all can say goodnight to you guys. We appreciate you. You make every weekly podcast fun to be in because we get to explore these things with you guys. So, you want to say night?
Night.
Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
And we're going to send you all over to Spofi, who is currently playing Final Fantasy 14 because, why not? And she's doing nest raids and doing some comfy things with her FC and her community. So hopefully you all can go over there and show some paparazzi love to Spofi. And we'll see you all again next week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye bye.